Good morning, everyone. Please come on in and come as close to the front as you can. We have a special celebration after this grand round. As you can see, we're going to have the first inaugural Patient Experience Award, and it is going to be very special, not to be missed. But we do understand if you have to leave after this grand round to go back to clinical. And I do want to thank you this morning for being here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kathy Gorman, the Executive Vice President of Patient Care Services and Chief Operating Officer. And I want to thank you all for braving that storm. It's really awful out there. The streets are full of snow. They're packed. And I'm joking a little bit. And the federal government is closed. so welcome to Washington, D.C. And in all fairness, we are paying close attention to the weather, and we want everybody to be safe, and most importantly, our staff and patients and families. So anyway, thank you for being here. This is really great. For those of you on WebEx, thank you for joining us. Make sure you sign in for your WebEx, because at the end we'll announce a special bonus points for being here. So do make sure you sign in. So I would like to welcome you to our 6th annual Patient and Family Experience Week. And yes, this is the 6th annual, and we are so, so pleased. I really want to give a huge shout out to our Patient Experience Planning Committee. For those of you who are on the committee, could you raise your hand if you're here? Martha, Jennifer, Melissa, Mike, Basra, and Tiffany, if you're here, thank you for all of your hard work, because this week has just been really, really wonderfully planned, and a special, special thanks to Martha for her leadership and really making sure this is coming off without a hitch. Thank you, Martha. So this year on this particular session, we're going to be focusing on our new core values that Children's National has adopted really over the last 15 months on compassion, commitment, and connection. And I think many of you have been exposed to those core values, but we're going to talk today about how do we leverage our core values to build resilience. And I think it's a topic that is near and dear to all of our hearts in terms of how do we become more resilient with everything going on and the hard work that we have to do, particularly for those of you who are on the front lines delivering compassionate, committed, and connected care to our patients and families every day. Today, we have the privilege of having Dr. Johnston here. She'll explore the risk factors with physician and caregiver burnout. And our goal is to support you in developing greater resilience and connecting with your own sense of purpose, and particularly how we think about our purpose and the work that we do every day here at Children's National. But before I introduce Dr. Johnston, I do want to acknowledge why we are here today, and we could not do this without our very, very supportive and wonderful philanthropic partner, and that's Betty Ewing. This is Betty Ewing. For those of you who don't know Betty, Betty has been involved with Children's National for many, many years in various capacities, including the early 80s, where she was a social worker and reported into family services. She worked in the emergency department. She worked in neurology and neurosurgery units until 2000. And I have to tell you, as being here for many years, I used to see Betty all the time on the old 4 green neurosciences, standing there waiting for the next patient referral and ready to go into those rooms. And I wish Betty was here with us today to hear that. She did become a volunteer then later on, and then she was also served in our Children's Foundation board. And I can tell you from personal experience and from those of you who know Betty, there isn't anybody who is more committed to our core values of compassion, commitment, and connection. They truly are at her core. So it was more than 8 years ago that Betty and Chuck, her late husband, donated or gave philanthropy for the Ewing Service Excellence program here at Children's National. And that's really what launched and spearheaded all of our service excellence and patient experience work over this past 8 years. And it really has been Betty's philanthropy and Chuck's philanthropy that has really supported this program, and it has made it what it is today. They have supported also family services, bone health, Safe Kids, and psychosocial support, the Dream Clinic, and sports medicine, and numerous other hospital priorities. So although Betty could not be here today, she was on a flight yesterday from Florida to come up but obviously the flight was canceled with the weather. We just want to acknowledge her and thank her and her family. We'll have an opportunity, hopefully, to thank her later in the spring when she can come up when it's warmer weather. But now I'd like to kick off and with our grand round speaker, Dr. Fran Johnston. Dr. Johnston is no stranger to Children's National. She has been working with us over the last 15 to 18 months on our core value journey. And I have the personal pleasure of knowing Fran from when I did a fellowship at Wharton, and she's just truly fantastic. So you're in for a real treat this morning. She is a world-renowned scholar, practitioner, research, and co-author of this book, Becoming a Resonant Leader. And for those of you who haven't read it and haven't done the exercises, this is really a fantastic book to reground yourself and what you're doing every day around the noble purpose and delivering care. Fran is also the founder and CEO of Telios Leadership, which is a boutique consulting firm, focuses on organizational development, executive coaching, and leadership. And don't let the word boutique consulting firm fool you. She is consulting right now for the New York Federal Reserve. She has done work in Cambodia with Pol Pot regime, so she is not light in her consulting skills and organizational development, and has amazing stories to tell in terms of how do you build resilience with some communities that can be very challenging. So over the course of her 25-year career, Dr. Johnston has truly become a trusted mentor, an advisor for many C-suite executives and top teams. Her development as a scholarship practitioner includes study through the Gestalt theory, a theory of psychology applied to organizational development that gets to the root of personal and organizational potential and mobilizes energy to change. So that's why she's here today, to help us think about that. She's a long-standing faculty member at the Wharton School of Institute for Executive Education, and she is a senior associate of faculty of the Gestalt International Study Center in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, where she's also taught their flagship course for senior executives as well. And previously, Dr. Johnston has taught at Temple University, Philadelphia College of Science and Community College of Philadelphia, and the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland. So, without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Fran Johnston. Thank you.
All those accolades. So, good morning. I can't remember the last time somebody rolled out the red carpet for me, literally. And good morning to all of our friends who are not able to be in the room with us. So I'm going to do an accelerated path through resonant leadership, a little bit of emotional intelligence, and link it to your core values, which I'm so impressed with how they've become manifest, right? So a year ago, or maybe a year and a half ago, myself and my firm interviewed a lot of you and helped do a qualitative research study listening to you about what you think were the key core values that you wanted to bring to light here at Children's National. And it's amazing to see what Mike and Melissa and the team have, and everybody else have brought to life. Now, they make sense. They really do. In fact, they're going to make sense when I give you the research about emotional intelligence to see that these kinds of behaviors really do make for better care and better self-care and better relationship care. So really quickly, though, I want to start with an exercise. If you could just turn to somebody next to you and say, take a minute, not even a minute, take 15 seconds and locate something that you're grateful for, that you personally are grateful for in terms of your own life in this moment. So just figure out what it is, locate it, feel a little warmth, and then tell it to somebody else. You have 3 minutes to do this. All right, see if you can notice anything. Now, what did you notice about yourself, about your other, about your experience? Anybody? Happiness? Smiles? It woke you up? It was the same similarity? That's great. I'm going to go on and tell you there's actually a biological experience that you had there, as brief as it might be, that can release positive anti-stress hormones. So one of the elements to take away is that this is some of happiness at work, or bringing your compassion values to the present moment, is available to you at any given moment. It doesn't have to be big and elaborate acts. Okay, there's micro moments. So, but to get us started, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I want the back end for you as a bigger gift. But it's really important to understand that any stress that you're currently feeling, which can disconnect you from living the values, which is why we're interested in stress a little bit, is, kind of well-earned because of what's happening in healthcare right now. There's a lot of pressure to reduce costs. I'm sure you're aware of that. There's a lot of reduce costs and increase value. There's a shortage of professionals in the workplace right now. There is across the board in healthcare, but also in other industries, a generalized sort of lack of trust, kind of like a low-grade fever of, well, I don't know, of questioning. And I think that's something that we really, as leaders, and all of you in this room are leaders, whether you're leading yourself or leading your families or leading, groups of professionals, are responsible for setting tone and trying to help people stay engaged and trying to, with your own behaviors, do those things which instill trust in others, right? Because of a generalized wondering about, all this change. So when there's a lot of change going on in your own personal life, you know this, and certainly in your organizational life, it causes people to question. And questioning is one of the good things about our human species when we use judgment, but we also need to not just question, we have to move. So just to say that there's a lot, it's a trend out there in healthcare because of all the pressure, right? And the last point, which is really interesting and stressful, is greater consumer involvement and a stronger voice in the care process, right? So on the one hand, philosophically, isn't that a great thing? But on the other hand, practically, oh my goodness, who has time to listen to even yet again another bigger set of stakeholders, right, that are in an emotional state, and particularly in children's hospitals, I think. But you could say anywhere, but for sure in children's hospitals. So what do we do with all this? That's a trend. It's definitely a trend, and so it's causing us to look at the way we work. Okay, so let's see that there's some hope on the other side, but it's a huge transition process in healthcare right now that we're in. We could try new things. I will argue today, based on research, that trying new things really needs a particular state, emotional state, for people to actually enthusiastically experiment. And these three values that you guys have offered to yourselves will seriously help with innovation and trying new things, right? People want to. Again, this is all from PwC, extensive research about global healthcare. So if you want to follow up, the research is available for you. You should totally know what's happening in the bigger world if you don't already, because it will help contextualize what's happening in your everyday experience. And one of the things I was thinking as Kathy was introducing me, I love about working in healthcare is that it's a learning system. I mean, the fact that you have grand rounds, in this morning, people are showing up for a lecture, is just a wonderful tradition that says, hey, we're here to learn. There's always something that we can learn. So that's adaptation or adaptive leadership, the new literature would call it. So you come from a long and good tradition of staying open to new ideas and changing your practice based on what you learn. So that is investing in talent right there. All right. So again, because I want to get to the other stuff, I'm not going to ask for questions. And probably there are people in this room that know a lot more of the, I think I'm going to touch this carefully. I don't want to I don't want to mess the whole thing up. Do I hit escape? Okay. You know. And then down. Now I'm good. Okay, so navigating change. So you're going through change in this institution, and oh, by the way, in your own lives, we're typically undergoing some sort of change process, whether we know it or not. I'm an advocate for intentional change, so if you get that book that Kathy was waving around, that's all about setting off for an intentional change process as adults. It's the only way adults like to change, is if they have some sense of control. We'll talk about control in a little bit. But anyway, so navigating change requires some embodied values, so that's what you have. You know, some mission focus, you got plenty of that in this world. Some collaboration, we rarely change just by ourselves or change anything in our work environment alone. So that means it's a relational act. That's where emotional intelligence and resonant leadership will help you. How you work with others. By definition, it can involve some sense of innovation, right? Strong relationships, so the values that you have and some of the practices that you were learning yesterday with mindfulness, and I'll give you today, will help you build strong relationships, again, which would then help instill trust, which is a really important thing. Resonant leadership, and then emotionally intelligent employees, which you're modeling for them, and you yourself should be exercising your own emotional intelligence. So you want to create teams, pockets of sets of people that are living the values, working an agreed upon set of behaviors consistently, as much as consistently as they can, and managing your stress. That will help you navigate change. So this is the human process of these overall big change, organizational change efforts that are everywhere. All right, but change causes stress. So it's not always fun unless we're trying to do it in a way that is bringing out the best in all of ourselves. I'm going to come back to stress in a little bit, but just to kind of get it out there from the front end, you know, dealing with stress. You have to de-escalate conflict. It's one of the things that the research shows that the best chief medical officers and other medical leaders do is recognize conflict, move towards it, and de-escalate it, as opposed to avoid it or, you know, throw kerosene on it and make it become bigger. Hard to do if you're not mindfully, like, managing yourself, right? So you have to be at your best as a navigator of relationships to be able to effectively do conflict management, which is one of these EI competencies. Recognize your limitations, ask for help, learn to say no. Asking for help sometimes in heroic professions like yours is hard to do. Just, actually, I need help here, or I need more instructions, or I need somebody else's mind to help me think this through. I need some collaboration. So managing your stress will be enabled when you can ask for help. And also say no. A friend of mine says, you know, whenever we say yes, we're saying no to something else. Think about that. Whenever you say yes, you're saying no to something else. So that takes some, you know, relationship skills to be able to navigate in these relationships that you're in, to be able to say, actually, no, I can't do that, or I can't do that this time. So that's why you'll see conflict management as a key competency in healthcare. Reevaluate your perspective of the situation, and we're going to play with that a little bit too. So perspective and perception is key in this whole space. Like, how are you even perceiving the situation? Are there multiple realities to the situation? Are there alternative ways of thinking about it? Can you change with true self-management the way you're looking, literally the data that you're picking up? Because we react to data emotionally. So one of the self-management techniques is to be able to, you know, think about how am I even seeing the situation, which means you have to slow down a little bit. You have to be able to have that observing mind. Maybe your mindfulness professor yesterday said there's something about being able to see yourself in action and not just be in action. Okay. Friendships at work, what about that? Wouldn't that be nice? You guys have a warm culture. I see it every time I visit. There are friendships in this room. Everybody should have a friend at work, at least one, maybe a couple, or social bonds, right? But of a particular nature. And since we spend so much time at work these days, arguably you don't always have a lot of friends outside of work anymore because work, you know, now takes up a lot of our time. So that has some of us researchers thinking about, well, maybe we should, instead of the old idea of there's like work and there's home, we should be thinking about how do I serve my holistic self, which needs friends, right? But do it at work as well. I'm not saying you shouldn't have outside friends. I'm just saying that lots of times when I go around as an executive coach and I ask people, when was the last time that you saw a friend that had nothing to do with work? That it's sadly a small number. So I would also argue you should have a friend that knows nothing about what you do and just like be able to have some space where you don't talk about work. Putting customers and clients at the center of your conversations and your whole consciousness, especially in a business like what you're in, really enables empathy and other positive emotions. So putting the customer and the client first is a virtuous cycle, even though it can cause more work, apropos of the disruptive trends in healthcare when everybody wants a voice. So that's a tension or a dilemma. All right. So this is the research that comes out of my colleague and friend, Annie McKee, who's just written a book about how to be happy at work. There's a whole, like you can go buy her book, you can see her on YouTube. But the basic thing of what she's finding is that you want to find ways to support your mission, the organization's mission, because then you'll feel more in sync with what you're doing and it'll be congruent. So, and you have a good mission. So for that, for you guys, I'd say, for sure, you want to try to be living that as much as possible. Find your own purpose in work. So when we think about noble purpose, each of you should have some sense of why you do what you do. Why have you chosen to be here? Why have you chosen to work in pediatrics? And then connect every day to that, finding ways and telling yourself, oh, look at me, again, observing mind. I'm living my purpose. And then maybe you see that friend, you have a little gratitude round, and say, hey, how are you living your purpose today? This is what I did today that helped me live my purpose. I swear to God, you'll feel better. Because it turns out that we humans, we like to feel like we're on purpose, like we're doing something that matters. And we can get totally lost in the administrivia and kind of political dynamics of life and kind of get out of sync and feel like, I come to here all the time and now yet I'm not living, you know, how is this helping me? So that is a perspective-taking exercise. Like at any given moment, you can see that there are things that you're doing here every day that help you live your purpose. And you want to notice them. That's perception, mindfulness. And then acknowledge it to yourself or to others. Like, look at that. I did it. I'm doing it. And you'll feel better. It sounds corny, but it works. I know it sounds corny. Fix problems. That's the other thing. It's about efficacy. Try to fix. You want to feel like you can make a difference in fixing some problems, which means you kind of have to lean in and like figure out how I can be helpful. How can we make this situation better? How can we fix some of the things which we feel are causing us stress or that somehow are imperfect? We can look at them and say that's imperfect and complain, yes, or we can look at them and say, wow, that's imperfect. We better figure out what to do about it and then lean into that. You'll feel better in the latter than the former because the former perspective has you end up in a victim place. And nobody likes to be that, psychologically, emotionally, chemically. So, you know, fix some problems, contribute to the greater good, find your purpose with your relationships, and set learning goals so that you know that you're learning every day, that you're on this learning journey, and you're in a learning organization. So that should, you know, that'll help you. All right. Second section, this is my much longer lecture. This is totally in the literature. You could start with a book called Primal Leadership or Harvard Business Review called Leadership That Gets Results, and then back into 60 years of competency-based research about what are the behaviors that great leaders do that differentiates them from just good leaders. And again, small L leadership as well as formal leadership. So this is a model that says to you, based on research across industries, across cultures, all over the world, men, women, everybody who's trying to get something done, what are the things that I should be practicing that will make a difference, the behaviors, the competencies. Some of them are embedded in your, I'm happy to say, in your values. So that's a double win for you. You can live the values and get better results. So again, this is a longer lecture, but the bottom line is that anything you can measure out there on the business results end, and in your case, it could be safety, it could be customer satisfaction, it can be efficiency, it can be, there's emerging research in healthcare in terms of some of these behaviors around patients' adherence to what the caregivers say they should do. It's amazing, actually, think about it, because it's a relational world. But anyway, those things that can be measured, you can get a 20 to 30% better outcome. So you can either get 0 of the better outcome, or you can get 20 or 30% better based on the climate that is created by a leader. So that could be in your units, that could be around a bed, that could be in the administrative office, the climate, like how does it feel every day when I come to work in this group? So not the big organizational climate, but the group climate, you know, that a leader is responsible for. And my dissertation was on emergent member leaders, so I'm like, actually, I think the members are more powerful sometimes than even the leaders in setting climate. But that's, again, a different lecture. So the climate that's created, you will get that 30%. The leadership practices, or the behaviors that are exhibited, reinforced, and executed by the small team is the climate. That creates 70% of the variance. So group life really matters. How we manage our groups in terms of standards, so high standards, low standards, team commitment, people on board, fairness, do people feel like it's fair? That's a huge one. Are we looking across equally, providing equal and valuable opportunities for people? So those things then create the climate. Now, how does the leader do that? Well, he or she uses her emotional intelligence, which is like 90% of your ability to do those, to have adaptable leadership practices that create the right climate and to see the group, that social awareness, 90% of those go back to these EI competencies. So you're going to have a better functioning healthcare system, better functioning units, better functioning clinics, if you kind of pay attention to how we lead and follow. What are those key behavioral competencies, the 80 to 90% that differentiate great leaders from good leaders? Again, this is not like terrible leaders. I'm talking like your baseline. Your baseline is your IQ, and your baseline is your technical competence. That's not what distinguishes great leaders. Sometimes it's quite controversial for some technical professions. I understand that, and I've argued with all of them by now, that's what gets you in the door. But to be a great leader, you have to get results through other people, right? That goes to the climate and the team and how do we work together? How do we coordinate care, things like that. That's a relational space, and so that's why these emotional and social competencies become have such a greater impact. So it starts with self-awareness at the top. You have to know what's driving you, what are your emotional reactions. From there, you can make choice, and that's self-management. You can choose a positive outlook, and I can tell you there's a lot of good research on positive emotions. You can choose achievement. Am I going to try harder today? I'm going to try to fix that problem over there, or am I not? Am I going to be, keep my standards low and just kind of shrug my shoulders? That's achievement orientation. That's to do with standards. And if you're doing any change or innovation, you need people who are driven to try to make change. And we want to foster climates that makes that possible. One of the climate dimensions is not unnecessary rules and regulations that stops me. I have a good idea, I want to try to fix the problem, but I can't, right? Organization, adaptability and emotional self-control. So am I managing my emotions? That would probably make sense to you. You have to both amp up your optimism through gratitude practices. You also need to kind of ramp down your sense of negative outbursts of anger, other emotions that can derail us and create problems in our relationships. So what Dan Goleman did in the late 90s was bring together the literature on mindfulness, neuroscience, and the management literature. So he really brought to the foreground of our thinking, and now it was early stages, but it's all been reinforced now with fMRI technology studies. So we really know that there are different parts of the brain that light up when different things are happening. Very different parts in terms of the competencies that you're experiencing in yourself or in others. So he said that self side suddenly becomes very important. So we could have a Grand Rounds lecture about organizational change that talks all about process or things which are external to the self. I could spend an hour talking about these relationship competencies that have to do with how you treat others. And yes, that's important. But you won't be able to be your best at that if you aren't able to be aware of who you are and managing yourself. And that's for everybody. So that's why we need emotionally intelligent interns and residents and medical students and the people that are leading them and clerks in the billing office and environmental service people. And you know this because this is the human part, right? Everybody's kind of got to be in the game. Good news is you feel better when you're operating out of this model. So us leaders, we really do want to try to reinforce it on people. The social awareness quadrant then is empathy and organizational awareness, and I'll speak a little bit about empathy, which is so relevant for your world. But first I'm managing myself, and then I'm looking at the environment and how accurate am I seeing things, and how much can I feel with accuracy what the other might be feeling. Both cognitive empathy, but also affective empathy, like I can really feel what it's like to be that family. And it's not just feeling is stage one, that's awareness, but then acting based on what you're aware of. And if you aren't a self-managing human, you're going to be in your cognition all the time, and you're not actually going to feel what they might be feeling. So you're losing a source of intelligence. That's why we call this emotional intelligence. It's like an intelligence. It's going to help you make better decisions. So if you can do the self side and then look at the environment side, then you'll be able to more regularly and predictably manage conflict, influence people, coach and mentor, and work well in teams, right? If you aren't doing the former, though, these skills that you probably could access on a non-stressful day won't really be available to you. You have them, but you can't actually use them. And Aristotle was onto that problem with us. Like, we are, inconsistent creatures. Okay. So I'm going to have you do a little exercise, a little experiment. All you have to do is not speak. I'm going to show you a couple of slides. I want you to just notice what you see, and don't tell anybody. And then we'll go back and we'll discuss it. Which center circle is bigger? Don't say. What do you see? What do you see? Classic Psych 101. Okay, so which center circle appears bigger? This one. The one on the left appears bigger. Some people I heard same, right? They are in fact the same size. And when I was doing this with a senior executive team at Microsoft, one of the people in the room was in charge of pixelation. And she jumped out of her chair and ran up with a ruler. It was like arguing with me about like whether in fact they were actually the same, and that was fun. So basically they are the same, but based on what you're it's called contrast effect, right? So when you compare this person with the field, right, with the things that are around it, and it appears bigger. This one over here, same size, different players around the person, and suddenly that center circle doesn't look as much like a star. Right? So when we're thinking about employee performance or putting people on special projects and trying to decide who's good, well, we have to consider who are we comparing them with. Because they could look the same. In fact, they're the same size, but they could be perceived totally differently based on our comparisons. To make the point that, what we see is not always the total story. Okay, this one, what do you see? Face. Face? Everybody see a face? Yep. Anybody not see a face? Couple people can't see the face, so I'm not blaming you. What do you see? What else do you see? Liar. Okay. So if you turn your head to the right, that's what we ask people to do, suddenly a whole new reality shows up. And it, sometimes it's influenced. So how many people didn't see liar? Just raise your hand. Okay. Like vast majority of the room here is raising their hands. Didn't see it. Now, who saw it first? That's a different cognitive style. It's interesting. Right? So here's your tip on this. First of all, there's always something else going on. There are multiple realities. And what happens is we get quite fixed on the first thing that we see. And then if other people see something different, we're often likely to argue with them. And we're coming from a good place, like, come on, I see the face. Don't you see the face? And they're like, nah, I don't quite see it. And then we can make them feel like they're dumb, right? Or what do you mean you can't see it? It's right there. It's as obvious as, as day. But what is figural for them is the other reality. So first you have to be good at holding your ground and helping people see that there's more than one thing going on and try to sort out what's the best thing we want to do. And second, you just want to hold your cognitive categories a little bit lightly. And when you're moving fast and when you're kind of highly trained in technical skills, we can get really pretty attached to the way we see things. So we want to just be like, okay, anybody see anything else? And if you're the leader, you often want to ask everybody else to speak first. I'll make that point with this next slide. So what do you see here? A dog. Anybody see the dog? Do you see the dog? Raise your hand if you see the dog. Be proud. My dog. All right. What kind of dog? Dalmatian dog. Is he hungry? Yeah, he's looking for food. He's a stray. You can make up all kinds of stories. All right, if you don't see the dog, who doesn't see the dog? That's good. Hang on there. Should you be so inclined as to see the dog, there's an ear up there and a nose, and there's a leg, and here's sort of a back leg. And then we kind of ignore the fact that there's no haunches on this particular animal. We have no other leg. There's no tail. He kind of fades into the background. So who knows what this little slide is trying to teach us? Among other things, we don't like incomplete data, right? There's no dog, right? There is a bunch of black and white spots that kind of aggregate to remind us of an existing category in our head, dog. So then we go look, we make it fit. We accommodate our cognitive categories to match the data. It's fascinating, isn't it? It's good. I mean, in a way, it's good. Otherwise, you drown in all this data that you look at all the time. So we need to have some categories, some ways of thinking. But we need to, again, be open to the possibility that our minds are doing that, our brains are doing that more than the environment is doing it to us. Right? We're bringing that to the party. We have very active brains. The other thing which happened in this is that I asked you, I said, so what do you see? That's called priming. So the leader says, what do you see? And people go off looking for something, right? And then when I said, what about this dog? What kind of dog? And then people are like, okay, dog. There must be a dog in here, right? She says there's a dog. So we're that, susceptible to the leader's kind of suggestion. So those of you who are leaders of teams, you really want to be mindful of what you're kind of leading the witness with in a way, right? And it's like a shortcut, right? We don't have time to have everything be a perfect process. I'm not saying you question everything. I'm saying you notice from a self-awareness and social awareness point of view that we have a processing process that we're bringing elements to the party around. So, again, selective perception, kind of we look at the nose and that makes it be a dog, halo effect, we overrate certain attributes. Again, we're doing this, right? Which is why we need strong communication skills, because we need to be able to talk to one another and talk across power, up to power when we think maybe there's alternative or multiple realities, and I have a point of view. right? Are we overrating an individual or an individual trait? Sorry, it says train, but it's trait, right? So if they went to XYZ school is the classic one. Well, if they trained with that person, then they must be fill in the blank. And then we would underestimate or undervalue other traits, like their social skills or something like that. Stereotyping, you would understand, rigid bias perceptions. And again, bias and stereotype are not in and of themselves bad things. They help us organize a lot of data. What becomes problematic is what we do with the data, with the assessments that we're making. Okay, so in the social awareness quadrant, we're thinking about empathy. What we know here, again, from these fMRI studies is that emotions are contagious. So this is one of the great things about your value of compassion, among others, and connection, right? So connection says we're connected. Now, I'm going to add to that that there's a lot of research that says that we create an emotional experience together. So I will catch your optimism, or the alternative, I will catch your anxiety. I will catch your anger or your frustration. And you all know this from your own experience. You're walking down the hallway, you're feeling good about your day, you've reconnected with the purpose, things are good. And then you kind of walk into a meeting and somebody's having a really bad day. And this could also be, of course, families and all the rest, right? So you have to learn what are my emotions, what are their emotions, and to kind of regulate, right? You walk into a meeting, somebody's having a bad day, next thing you know, that when you leave that meeting, you're like, oh my God, this is never gonna get any better, woe is me, I'm not living my purpose, So the trick there, the tip, is don't let other people's mood negatively affect you. In fact, you can spread a positive mood. Maybe they're having a bad day. Let's use some compassion. How about we bring some hope and optimism to the party? And that's where social bonds can really help us if we are intentionally self-managing, self-aware and self-managing. So contagion and mirroring and comforting are biological experiences that we have between people that can help us be resonant leaders and make better decisions and manage our brains, right? So with the perception slide, if we are not managing our stress, we are over likely to have the rigid bias perspective, right? So if we're managing our stress and somebody's helping me like cognitively slow down, breathe, then we're going to be more likely to see all the data that exists. The biggest thing about empathy in your world, there's, you should really study it if you haven't, especially because you're working in this kind of practice, right, where you're working with children and families, is to understand the power of empathy and the limits of it also. So you both need to protect yourself, but you also need to open yourself to the other's experience. Not just patients and families, which is probably the most obvious for you, but also with your colleagues, right, and other paraprofessionals and others in this world. What must it be like to be them? What do they need from me? Am I making the situation better or worse? I'm going to skip that for now. I'll skip that. So a little bit about burnout. Probably you've heard about it. Maybe you've even experienced it. On the handouts, there is a handout called sacrifice syndrome, I believe. Yes? Sacrifice syndrome. It's a little checklist, a Cosmo checklist. You might take that quickly while we're sitting here, since you are good at multitasking, even though we know people aren't. But so, burnout is like this is an epidemic, and it's a real risk. It is a real risk to healthcare. So, and it's kind of it's a conundrum. I can't make you not be burned out. Only you can make you not be burned out. So emotional intelligence, your values, these things, practices where you get some exercise, and there's a whole long list, and I'll leave you with a tip sheet about it, is what's necessary to help you avoid this caregiver burnout. The studies are kind of unequivocal that it has a real impact on care and outcomes. The extent to which the caregivers themselves are brittle and burned out. And it goes to the cognitive stuff that I was just showing you with perception. It goes to the nature of the relationships and how we treat people and then how they feel and then where they complain. You know, to be your resonant self with all people is not easy. So I don't want to add more stress by like pouring this expectation that you be a perfect person. That's not what this is about. This is about learning techniques and building social bonds, techniques to manage your stress and building the social bonds that can help you as a pair or as a small team be at your best. So that somebody steps in if one person's having a bad day. That one person who's having a bad day might say, you know what, my car broke down on my way here and I don't have enough money for that car, so I'm stressed. I'm bringing with me stress to work. Could you go talk to those people? Because I'm not sure I'm going to be at my best here today. That would be self-management and collaborative practice. And when we say that, when we surface self-awareness, how we're really feeling, most human beings, most of the time, kind of go, oh, okay, let me adjust. The problem is we don't say it out loud enough, which is transparency, which you can't really be transparent if you don't know how you're feeling. So you can't really manage yourself as well if you aren't practicing self-awareness and being able to ask for help and seek support. Okay, I'm just going to skip to this slide and then end with the values. So this is Barbara Fredrickson's work. Anybody familiar with this work, positivity? Ah, well, I have earned my money. Okay, so you should totally get this book. I think it's probably like $5 on Amazon right now. It's all based on research. The book's called Positivity. She was a professor at Penn, and now I think she's at Michigan. There's been a whole revolution in psychology research to kind of look at, instead of looking at humans from a deficiency point of view, like let's figure out what happens when it's not working. Let's figure out what's happening when people are thriving, when they're actually doing well. And that's part of, it builds on the EI work, and it's gone even further. So this particular book says these 10 positive emotions will bolster your resilience. They'll make you a better, faster learner. They'll keep your cognitive categories flexible, like I was saying earlier. They certainly will help you in your interpersonal interactions. So you want to practice some of these things. Gratitude, for instance, like our gratitude greeting this morning. It's so easy to do. What happens is it releases oxytocin. And if I had you, for as long as I had, you know, Kathy and her colleagues, I'd have you really slow down and do some of these exercises where you can feel the shift and learn the practices about how do we interact with one another in such a way that we are utilizing the power of hope, for instance. You know, compassion, inspiration. You guys do inspiring things all the time. Again, helping yourself and others connect to the purpose. You would say, wow, did you see what we did there? That was an amazing thing. That we helped that family, that we helped that child. That is awesome. So awe is one of those emotions. But you got to like give it a chance to land, and you have to help yourself and others see it and feel it. So gratitude, serenity, interest, you have very interesting jobs. And if you're feeling bored, then reframe your job somehow or ask to do something else. There are no shortages of interesting things to do here, I'm sure, right? So interest, hope, pride, amusement, connecting. That's amusement, like genuine amusement. Things are funny, not at anybody else's expense, because that creates difficult things. So we're not teasing each other. We're not doing in-group, out-group dynamics. We're saying, wow, that's funny. Did you see that? See the look on their face? That was funny. Awe, love, and joy. So here's another plug for something that I get no money for. Inside Out. Have you seen the movie? Inside Out is a fantastically creative way of teaching people about emotions. And that is not just children, actually. We should all watch it like once a month, right? Because we really forget what joy is. What is the state of joy? And you see it there, and you're like, whoa, boy, I haven't felt that way in a while. You know, so how do we bring more of those emotions to our everyday practice? Here's the other secret to this, is that the research shows that you have to express or practice or experience 3 positive emotions to counteract 1 negative. 3 to 1 is the formula. That is profound, if you think about it. So the 1 is so powerful. 1 negative emotion is self-protective, right? So anger, frustration, anxiety, depression, right? They are conservative emotions. But to get us to change and to get us to move forward and to take risks and to be curious and to kind of get into interactions where we don't know what's going to happen, we have to like step over a natural conservativeness. And these positive emotions are the ones that get us to do that help us learn, help us grow, help us build new relationships. So 3 to 1. 3 to 1 experiences. They broaden and build. There's all the benefits. Again, research-based. You know, cognitive flexibility, so that's the categories. Better decision-making, better judgments, innovation, creativity, and resilience, which is what we're here to talk about. And it helps you connect and engage with others, which is your connection value. So this is the fuel. Positive emotions are the fuel to make yourself be a resident leader and also to kind of, you know, consistently express these values with others. You can get copies of these slides. This is some of the ways you do it. Okay, last one. So compassion at work. You guys have compassion, correct? Yes. Self-awareness and empathy are the keys to compassion. Compassion starts with yourself. You have to be compassionate with yourself. That's a Buddhist notion, and it turns out to be backed up by research, which is what we're finding out actually about a lot of Eastern practices, that they are in fact backed up by research now that we do it with fMRI technology. So the frequency with which you experience compassion as a worker will increase your ability to empathize with others. So that means as colleagues, we need to express compassion with one another. Self-compassion and compassion with the other. You know, feeling proud, grateful, inspired, some of those positive emotions will help fuel the, you know, experience of compassion. Okay, commitment. So we want to know that what we're doing is we're doing something that matters, that's linked to purpose and noble purpose. And what you do does matter. So reminding each other that what you do does matter, reminding yourself that what we do matters, will help you stay kind of forward-toed in terms of committing to an action, committing to make a difference, to feel like you can make a difference and that you want to. Purposeful, meaningful engagement. Mindful engagement, like I'm on purpose here. This notion of being on purpose is very, very connected to commitment. And why would you do it? Like, why do we do it? We do it because we care about the purpose and higher mission of the organization and ourselves. Okay, so that's commitment. Again, backed up by research. And then connection. You can go in a lot of different directions with this, but it all comes back to healthy relationships. So we have tons of research that shows that unhealthy relationships, toxic relationships at work will erode performance like crazy. Because people start to feel afraid, they get disengaged, they're like, why should I? Why should I work so hard? Why should I speak up? I might get in trouble. They talk themselves out of, remember, 3 to 1 ratio? Like there's a million reasons not to connect or move forward. So we really have to work on these resonant relationships so that it's they are as neutral to good as possible. Poor relationships at work lead to decreased job satisfaction, they lead to depression, they lead to physical ailments, they lead to absenteeism. So we really, really have to kind of, hey, make it like inviting, not just the purpose of what we do, but I'm happy to see you. Like, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. I'm glad that you've chosen to come here this morning. Again, I think you get it. So here's the point. It really is going to take you being mindful and practicing these positive emotions in your handouts. Not only do you have the sacrifice syndrome, those of you that filled it out, anybody stressed out here? You have a few check marks? Awesome. chuckles of recognition. So that means you have to use renewal practices, which is on the back sheet. Everybody should have your own self-care practices. You might, as a team, tell each other what they are, and then we can make suggestions to one another. Like, hey, let's go for a walk around the building before we go into that meeting. Let's go sit in the nature center where we can get some sunlight. That would be intentional self-management, which is a sign of an emotionally intelligent leader. So you should have a renewal practice for each aspect of yourself, physical, relational, thinking. Then we have a creating resonance tip sheet. So here's all kinds of different small things that you can do. Most of what I'm talking about in my practice has to do with these micro moments of either being courageous or being connected or being compassionate. They are not the huge, heroic, heavy lifting of organizational change. But organizational change doesn't happen unless we're all engaged in a particular set of quality of relationships, because nobody really can get anything done by themselves, really anywhere anymore, except an artist by themselves, right? Everything else is a social act, which makes sense because we're mammals, right? So we like to connect with one another and work well with one another. Here's my final point. We forgive each other all the time. We don't talk enough about forgiveness. But none of this would work if we weren't saying, oh, she's having a bad day, right? And then we let it go. So you can rely on that as a practice that will make you still take those courageous acts towards people, of holding them accountable in a compassionate way, of seeing potential where they don't see it in themselves, and kind of just noticing one another every day at work. Okay, that's my time.